Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion. Second hour is something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're actually going to spend a second hour on the same thing, more questions. And so if you're a producer out there, make sure to ask your questions. This will be a great one. It's a great panel today. So I think we've got lots of answers just waiting to apply to your question. so stay tuned for that. Tomorrow, just as a reminder, we are now streaming part of our education hour. So 8 to 10, we don't stream that. At 10 o'clock, though, we're now starting to do education labs. And our own Emily Russo will be talking about Google Slides. So she builds some very interactive slides for folks inside of that. I was showing Keynote, or I think the first time I was kind of showing Keynote, and then we had other people starting to show Keynote, and then we just had a roundtable talking about Keynote. So that's the goal, is people taking over. And we had Brian Anderson showed an incredible amount of live video inside of Keynote. And anyway, so we're switching over to slides and talking about slides and how Emily uses it, or how she has used it in the past. So stay tuned for that. All right, we're going to throw it off to Bill. Bill, what's the first question?
Our first one this morning, Alex, is coming from Larry Littlehale in Concord, North Carolina. He says, Alex mentioned on MacBreak Weekly he has a go-to monitor that's priced around $180. Would he be willing to share the brand and model?
No, I like to keep it secret. I don't want to, I can't have people starting to use good monitor stands. Yeah, here we go. So this is the monitor stand that I use. This is the Huanu dual monitor stand. You can see that I purchased it twice. so this is definitely the one that I've been using here. Anyway, so that's the let me see here. That's the one that I've been using. I can probably try to show it to you here. I'm a little behind here. I was going to try to get it up on a camera here. We'll see if this will pop up quickly. Yeah. Oh, no, for some reason my clean out I just got a message that said it's disabled, and I don't know why. So we'll move on. But anyway, so the Huanu, it's got two arms, and it's not as smooth as some of the other ones that I've had. It's just that it's cost effective, and I buy a lot of them. So that's been really the advantage of that, has been just that they. I'll show it to you again here. So there's little screws on the top of those joints that let you can loosen it up, to make it more. Thing. And I said it was $80, and the price has changed, I think, since I bought it. so now it's $120. So anyway, but it's still pretty good. It's a good set of stands. There you go. Next question.
Larry Littlehale of Concord, North Carolina says, what are your thoughts? Whoops, wait a second. That didn't come up. All right, so that part of it is not working. Let's go on to Sirkanth S in Chennai, India. He says, what are your thoughts on Streamdeck pedal? Maybe use it to take push-to-talk advanced slides and trigger VTs?
I lost my window trying to get this thing to work. So yeah. Who's the first person on that one?
John Wallace and then David Brady. So let's go with John.
I think it's a good product. I am interested to see how it kind of plays. What's most interesting to me is how it can take context of window and apply different commands based upon what is the primary source of the window. So looking into that's kind of interesting.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, it definitely looks interesting. I'm always up for new ways of controlling things. I'm just curious on the types of switches they use, whether they're momentary or if pressure sensitive kind of thing, if they're in use for like a teleprompter, if it would advance or monitor speed kind of output thing.
And go ahead, Jeffrey.
So it's not out yet. I know the influencers have them, and I've been taking a look at all the documentation. The one thing that I don't like about it is that it seems to be a foot pedal that'll be perfect if you take off your shoes. If you have your shoes on, that pedal's going to be way too close because there's 3 buttons involved, and it works just like a regular Stream Deck. So they're fully customizable. You can take one of the buttons and turn it into a page thing, so it turns into more buttons from there. But I'm really concerned that the buttons are way too close together, and you're just going to get too confused because I don't think there's a clickability to it. It's just all touch. I would recommend something. I like something that has an actual physical button to it that I can feel it push down when I'm using my feet. I use the POK, which was one that was used for music. It was eight levers, and they were separated enough, and it worked really well. So I have my hesitations on this one.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It looks very similar to a pedal used for transcriptionists to control play, pause, and reverse. Three-pedal device looks just like that. I wonder if it's the same USB and USB driver that they're using.
Grant?
I don't know about this specifically, but just to say, I used a Panasonic, one of the Panasonic switches, 410, something like that. The old one had a foot switch, or at least a 6.5 connector that you could just plug a foot switch into, and I put a sustain pedal on it, and I used to run a show where I just switch between. It would just switch between preview and program bus, and so I'd have a interview show that I did, and that worked really well because I just tap my foot. I could maintain eye contact. And it would just switch between the two cameras. It worked really well. So if this gives us that opportunity, I think it could work really well for that type of thing.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing I would think about is push to talk. Like just I don't need to do anything other than I just need to open up my mic, and I just know if I let it go, or if I hit it, it's gone. But I would still need something in front of me that tells me that the push to talk turned off. So that would be the only thing I would think through there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alex Lindsay in Nevada, California. Do our panelists use the Streamdeck with Mixfre Pro to control their ATEM?
Grant?
No. So no, but I have I run it nicely on the latest iPad Pro, the biggest one, and every time I've gone to kind of do something remote with it, I just find that using it with the pages and the supersource and making the supersources all nice and big, I know it's just too intuitive with all those buttons. I know you can do some pretty cool stuff on the Streamdeck.
So when you're using Mixpre Pro, you're just using it off the iPad.
Off the iPad, yeah.
That's
great.
It adds a lot of value to the ATEM. It's probably the single most powerful thing that you can add to your ATEM is Mixpre Pro. Go ahead, Mitchell. Can't hear you.
It phenomenally enhances the ability to do other things. There's like 72 buttons on here now that you can control everything. And they've upgraded it to allow you to change audio settings and things like that. So now you got control over audio. I can go into the mic 1, make some adjustments there, go right back to the top, do some heavy switching if I want.
Is that a Streamdeck setting? I mean, is it... So when you use it that way, are you is that part of it, you just load it in?
You have to use a special version of Streamdeck to make it work because the regular the regular companion can't handle it. You have to run a beta version of the companion for now.
Right. No, absolutely. Excellent. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. is up next, and he says, how does LinkedIn compare as a streaming platform to YouTube and Facebook in terms of audience reach and views? I'm curious about any thoughts on LinkedIn from a production standpoint in terms of ease of use and quality.
Go ahead, John.
From a quality perspective, I think it's on point with Facebook. And really when you ease of use is simple enough. You're just pointing a stream to it like you would with any other platform. What it comes down to is audience and reach is where's your audience. So if you got your biggest reach in LinkedIn, then definitely use that. But from what I typically am doing, I'm typically going right to Facebook, YouTube, or Vimeo if I'm integrating into a current site that we own.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, for me, LinkedIn works just like Facebook, and that is people come on for only a couple seconds, and then they're easily drawn away, not by kittens, but more by other business things happening. So it's a great way to push yourself and say, hey, I'm out here streaming, but you definitely want to push them towards the YouTube for long-term streams.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Just in terms of discussion, I find LinkedIn bores me often, and it's really because my orientation is more creative than it is business, and I think it's very good if you're mind is in business and you want to just talk about business stuff and promotion and things like that, then I think it's a very good resource. The creative discussions I've had on there have all been, I would consider, lacking, and I think there are other forums that people talk more about the arts of this kind of art and less about the business, and I see LinkedIn in that form.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that for when they first came out, they didn't have RTMP, so people are doing it with their phones or with other things like that, or Vidyard, and a lot of them were like single camera streams, right? And I just can't watch those. So they were like two people sitting next to each other talking into the screen, and it just felt so businessy and kind of like not very well produced. And I just was like, so I jump on to lots of live streams, and just other than Gary Vaynerchuk, other than Gary V, he's really good at it. He can get in there and just be himself in front of a single camera, and you'll watch for a little while longer. But a single camera, I think that when I try to explain this to clients, a single camera puts an incredible amount of pressure on your host. They have to be extremely good, not like top 10%, like top 0.1%, to be able to hold an audience with a single camera for any period of time. And so if you have a host like that, like Gary, then do it. But if you don't, just know that no one's going to watch for very long. And so whatever you put into it is going to kind of fade away. You have to kind of, now the place that changes is when you start adding interactivity, you start answering questions and so on and so forth. And now you're everything's, so if you have someone up there, but again, putting pressure on them to answer the questions and do the stream and do the, those are the things that, what we've kind of gotten past that here, where we have a lot of different people working on things. And I think that's part of why it creates a tighter show. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. He says, a client wants to stream to LinkedIn along with existing streams to YouTube and Facebook. My opinion is they should focus their efforts on building their live audience on one platform and then supplement others. Curious as to the panel's thoughts on this.
I'll go, John.
What the gentleman from Pontiac, Michigan said was right on the money. You have to stream to where your audience is. And remember, 10x your viewers are going to come recorded. If you go look at office hours, 10x of our views on YouTube are on demand and not live. And so I always try to talk people out of doing live broadcasts in the first place.
There you go, Grant.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And I do think that if live is about interaction and community, then having the community ultimately in the same place is what you want. And so unless you can have everyone pointing to something like Makana, where you can have voting and have some interactivity around the community, then I don't think you do want to have them segmented like that. What it could be is that you're pushing out some teasing sort of videos that are then bringing them to where the whole community is at.
Yeah, go, John.
Yeah, same thing. You can stream to all those locations, but if you're not engaging with your audience on those different platforms, it means nothing. It's just noise.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
And of course, nowadays it's so much easier to actually get to all the platforms. And LinkedIn, although LinkedIn does have the extra hoops that you have to jump into and long waits if you do apply for that. So keep that in mind if you don't have LinkedIn Live, that it might take a long time for you to get in LinkedIn Live unless you have one of those extra services. But I would always pit those against Facebook and LinkedIn with Facebook, as I said earlier, because once again, that's a quick retention for most people that are watching that, but it might still drive some traffic to your channel. But yeah, definitely focus on YouTube first.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Vimeo will live stream to LinkedIn directly, so you can pick up that plan for whatever it is, $50 a month or something, and live stream, and then it just asks you to authenticate, and then you live stream to LinkedIn without having to ask jump through the hoops.
Also, the one thing that I don't know if this has changed or not, but one problem with LinkedIn is that it doesn't have an API to manage the questions. So with Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, you can have something look at it, get those questions, and allow you to manage it. We have another app that is like Mukana, except what it does, it just scrapes as many events as you want and just combines them all into one place so that we can manage it. And one of the reasons we haven't been excited about LinkedIn is because we can't do that. so it's kind of blind, which means we have to open up the interface and work inside of that, which is just hell. Like working directly in a comment list is just when when you haven't done it for a decade. It is, you're like, this is the caves have come back, and they're trying to push us back into them. So anyway, so I think that's one real challenge. I think one of the challenges with LinkedIn is I do think you just have to remember that you are now interacting with your professional audience, and you just want to be more careful than other places. It's much more casual on the other platforms, and it's why we don't stream to it. It's because I have to think really hard about where we are developmentally, and I think we're getting close, and we're going to be, when we get to 2.0, we're going to get 2.0 running. By the way, we're going to, I watched the 1.0 from Saturday, and I was like, we just have to go to 2.0. like we just have to force our way through, and it'll be a little glitchy and everything else, but anything will be better than what we're streaming to YouTube. It's like when I looked at it, the 720p is really a bummer, and so we're going to move to 2.0 February 15th. Or some, it's going to, and it will be what it is until we get it working, but we're going to stop using 1.0 as far as a streaming thing. So you'll see us try to tighten a bunch of things, but we'll keep tightening them and just keep working on it. I'm not going to let it delay any longer. Anyway, so that said, once we get that running, we are going to run it across all the platforms. That's not what I would recommend. It's just what we're going to do, because we need to know how the performance works and what does it look like, and then we can get smarter about those platforms. But I do recommend pushing people towards a platform that's going to have larger. I measure everything by average view time. So, the best average view time outside of Zoom. So if you can get people into Zoom, your average view time is much higher, but your average view time for a CDN is YouTube. It's probably 10 times Facebook and everybody else. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida is next, and he says, Zoom ISO audio question. Is it better to use local computers and switchers for Zoom audio rather than NDI audio, running Wirecast on a macOS as switcher with Loopback for Zoom audio? Thanks.
Go ahead, Grant.
My preference is to do hardware, right? So to get it out into hardware. But if you are going to do it in Wirecast, like you're saying, the question I'd have for you is, how are you doing the video? Are you doing video through NDI as well? And if you are, then you're already getting the NDI feed, and so keep it together and keep the sync in together like that. But if you're not and you're doing it some other way, then I would be doing audio directly. So I think you're maybe using scraping the audio somehow, or having that loop back into Wirecast. But I'd only be doing that if you were doing something else with the video. So if you're using the video with NDI, then use the audio with NDI.
And go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm a little old school, as I've said before here, and I use a console over my shoulder so I can mix everything independently, so I can have mix minuses and things like that. So I just find it easier than going into settings on my M1 to direct audio here and there. It just goes to one place, and that's the Zoom.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The only problem is if you're using the pluggable devices and then you have an ATEM mini attached to the pluggable devices to do the ISO recording from each person, then you need to have the audio as pristine as possible for that backup, because that's what I would do. And then for any type of streaming stuff, I would actually go through a mixer and then bring it in. I don't care about the latency about that, as long as I have pristine ISOs that I can remix from.
Your next question.
Next one comes to us from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He says, when can we have more live concerts on Office Hours? That was outstanding yesterday, and I'm going to give a thumbs up to that. It was fun yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. John?
One of the best shows on Office Hours, I thought. Alex has been a champion of conversing with these performers and not just having them perform. So much more intriguing to hear a story behind their performance and where they're coming from. It was outstanding.
Yeah, Grant?
Yeah, if we try to break down what was it about yesterday that was so special, you can say, because we've had music before, and music always lifts our show, right? It always does. It breaks it up and it lifts it to another level, and we experience it on another level. And so there's an extra 20% just by having music. But the thing that happened was there was another 20% maybe because of the whole far, what was it called? What was the software called?
Far play.
Far
play. Yeah.
Farplay. Thank you. There's another 20% because Farplay was amazing, right?
It's,
we wanted
it's
to see that.
farplay.io. Just make sure
There we
everyone
go.
does. There we go.
Make sure you get the ad in there, right? So there's another 20%. But here the thing was, then this amazing piano, right? I'm like, hang on,
Amazing piano, like not
geeky
good.
toy, right?
It's like Todd
Yeah.
level piano. It's like Todd what Todd does
Amazing.
on the violin and a piano.
But now we've got another 20% there, and then it's just like,
And then there's
I'm
Todd
just gonna
doing it as well.
We're going to turn on some visualizations, right? As we turn on the visualizations, we've got another 20% there, and then we get Todd in there doing awesome now improvisation on violin, like you don't hear that any day of the year. So amazing, right? So that's music. There's another 20% there, and I know I'm over, right? And that's the whole point, is that I think that it was a very special time, and I think we should always have more music, but we're probably not going to get it as special as that was yesterday.
Yeah, my goal is to do it at least once a month. So to have a concert at least once a month, and part of the push for trying to get in 2.0 just keeps on running behind. We're just going to go ahead and turn it on, was to get higher resolution when we do these. But I still think it was just amazing. And the visualization, by the way, he wrote it, from scratch. Go ahead, John.
I think for me as a musician, the nonverbal communication was like awesome to see. Just kind of them going back and forth and feeding off of each other. That's what you crave when you're in a live performance, and seeing that and be able to do that even over Zoom, being able to communicate was awesome to see, and love to see more of that, especially once they have the software release where multiple people can kind of participate together. That's going to be really interesting.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, I'm George. I absolutely, music speaks to my soul. It's apparently my love language, because I just get completely involved. But to Grant's point of, he was at like 120% of the pie. I'll add another 40% was that this was not their first rodeo. We were actually watching a unicorn do a thing that unicorn had been doing now for 2 years. And so it's not that it wasn't the tool, it wasn't the equipment, it wasn't the connection, it was the talent. And again, I'll add 40%, Grant. I'll see your 20 and raise you, because practice. And he had done this hundreds of times. It's brilliant.
And for artists, I mean, he had a really good setup, and you just see what you can do when you have all that talent, and then you add something that really captures it. It really brought us in. It was like a Rembrandt painting. Like, it was just and it was really simple. I love the description. It's like, I got this light thing over here. I think they call it a key light, and he might have been playing it down, but he's like, and then I got this one back here. It's like a hair light or something, and but I'm just a musician doing my thing. It was really good. It was definitely, I would say, probably one of our top 5, events, if not, top 1 or 2. Go ahead, Chris.
My guess is that he was very much playing it down. I got a sense during the mic check, somebody asked him to do something, and there was just a tinge of, I know what I'm doing. Like I'm getting to it. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Back off a little, and it was just, we're all just trying to help. And the thing is like, when somebody walks in, we don't know how much they do or don't know. And I think what we've learned is that most of the time we have to assume that they don't know a whole lot. But there was just a tiny little, and he was like doing it, and he looked at the camera, he goes, I know what I'm doing. It was, I think he was playing down his understanding of the tech he was dealing with.
Yeah, Bill.
Well, from Chris's point of view, I was in the middle of that. And it's interesting. I've done video a couple of times with people who are super, super smart. And half the time, you don't know it coming in. I remember I was once watching a neurosurgeon talk about doing neurosurgery. And I remember saying to myself, well, all he's doing it's a heart surgeon. All he's doing is sewing. How hard can that be? And that's the magic. These people who are super, super good at what they do, and it's high level skill, they make it look so ridiculously easy that you say to yourself, well, I could probably do that. It's just sewing. No, it's not. It's the hundreds of thousands of hours of learning how to open up a human being and sew on a heart. and how that's different than sewing on your clothes that makes those people special. That was just a fabulous example of a guy who really knows what he's doing and is able to communicate it to us and make it look simple. It's not, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch a musician, and there's something about watching. For me, like I don't know how to play the piano very well or at all, really, and but my daughter plays. But there's something about watching someone who's truly a master of a piano, where their fingers are just kind of flying along, and there's this thing that they're doing where they're just kind of skipping across the piano that I always find amazing to watch. So anyway,
and that the piano's playing with him.
Yeah, exactly.
He's playing a duet with the piano.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
there was so many layers to yesterday. If you haven't watched it, if you're watching this and you missed yesterday, you should go back and look at the second hour. It's quite a thing. Next question.
Courtney Gooden is next, and out of Hollywood here on the panel, are any of the Office Hours regulars working on the Winter Olympics next week?
I do believe that Tucker is out there. I'm not sure who else is on site there, but I know that Tucker is doing something. So I know Brian's not, because he's working for me this weekend. So thank goodness. But and then Nate, who we know is there right now as well. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, maybe we could have Tucker report in after they're over about what the setup was and what was used. Or is he working remotely from home? That is the question.
No, I think he's there. So we'll see if we can get the guys on. It might be that might be another one of those after hours kinds of things as opposed to office hours thing, but we'll see. Next question.
George Butters is up next in Halifax, Nova Scotia. My old reliable XLR shotgun mic died. It was perfect for doing a series of stand-up interviews by mounting it on a mic stand and pointing it at the talent rather than having to get a lavalier on and off of everyone. The price range was $200 to $400. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say in that price range, an oldie but goodie is the Audio-Technica 875R. It's been around for a long time, and it's in the $200 range or even under. New contender would be a Deity S-Mic 2 that's like in the 360 range. Rode has the NTG5. Benefit of that one is that it comes with a kit, so be aware of suspension needs. You might need a shock mount, so include that in your price if you have any kind of boom pole that you'll be working with or vibrations if you are putting it on a stand. It's nice to have a shock mount. And then if it's indoors, you may not want a shotgun. You may want a hyper. So you might want to look at Audix, and Audio-Technica has the 4053B. There's also one from Octava that's a really popular. I don't know. It's a capsule actually that screws on I don't remember the exact model number. I'll put it in chat. I'll think of it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Guy covered most of the ones that I was going to mention there. The NTG5. You might also want to go to look at the Sennheiser MKE 600, and it's an electret condenser, but it does come in that price range with a shock mount and a windscreen. Although it's not, and it's battery powered since it's lower voltage. Bias voltage has a penlight cell in there, or it will work with 48 volt Phantom as well.
How would you compare the NTG5 to the NTG2? Is it just a much better mic or it's a much newer mic, right?
I think the 5 is an RF condenser, like the Sennheiser MKE 416. So it uses a demodulated RF signal, so that usually they're pretty quiet. I think I may have an NTG5 somewhere. Haven't had it out in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I have, I don't know, I had a dozen of the NTG2s, and they worked really well. A little noisy. Like we definitely.
But I have NTG2s. Yeah, that's the electret shotgun that they make.
Yeah, and so it was a little noisy, but not. I mean, a really good sound, but definitely not the highest quality shotgun. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Sean Johnson in New York. He says, what is everybody's favorite HDMI to SDI converter? He plans to use one to convert a camera HDMI out to SDI for a switcher input.
David.
Can't recall model numbers, but we're a big AJA shop for conversions. Got a nice screw-on power thing, pretty solid build, and very versatile.
Go ahead, John.
Blackmagic if I'm not needing to upconvert, and then Decimator if I'm using any sort of upconversion.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
A ditto on the Blackmagic, up, down, and all around. They seem to have something for everything.
Grant?
Yeah, I would do a Decimator. I mean, the MXHD And the reason I'd say it gives a lot more than just the conversion that you want to do, that you could do, as John said, about doing scaling as well on it, which is super handy when you get in trouble. The other thing that I'd talk about is on a camera, it's likely that you might want to do like an external monitor. And so you can go in HDMI and out HDMI, give yourself a monitor, and then you've got multiple SDI outs as well. And then my other tip on the decimator is that you can change the sync to be free run, and then you can change the color from black to actually be a color output. So now it's actually like a test generator, and it's just super handy when you're setting up. You can plug in the decimator without a camera, run it out and have it there, and you're going to see, a red or a green screen on your switcher, and you're good to go before you've even got a camera there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'll second the decimator MDHX because it is it'll do a few things the Blackmagics won't do. It'll frame rate convert, and it will also has an LCD display on it, which is very handy. When you plug an input into it, it tells you what that input, it analyzes that input and tells you what it is, what the frame rate is, what the resolution is, etc. It can scale, it can flip the image also for you, left, right, if you want to use something into a prompter. So it's quite a versatile, $300 or $300 device, I think.
I don't know how many I have. I keep on finding them now.
The other possibility is the MD Cross, which has the same engine as Scalar engine in it, except it also includes a test pattern. So it's a test pattern generator, generates video test patterns for high def and tone. But it adds that for an extra $100.
I will admit that we bought a couple crosses and then stopped buying them because it was easy to get them into a state that we couldn't get them out of. Like they just weren't as quick when we were trying to, because usually when we use a decimator, it usually means something went wrong or something is off or something like that. And so when we needed to get to it quickly, we found trouble. There's a web interface as well for the MDHX, and everybody in my company seems to know how to use it except for me. I only know how to use the LCD screen. I just go and just make the changes, but evidently it's easier with the web page. All right, next question.
Srikanth Shriram of Chennai, India is up next, and he says, how to volunteer for Office Hours production?
Go to officehours.global. There's a place that you can sign up for I Want to Help. So you can find it there. And we're going to send out an email end of next week. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Grant Whitehead in Adelaide, Australia in the panel today. Best way to scrape a live stream video into a Zoom client running in the cloud?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if you can open up an app that supports dual monitors, it's best to put the screen scrape so you get a clean screen. So once you're there, you use vMix desktop capture. And then on the other side, you would use NDI and then go into the webcam settings for the NDI to choose that vMix source, and it'll show up in Zoom as a source.
Go ahead, Chris.
Grant, you're trying to switch this in the cloud, though, yeah?
I don't have to switch it. They're just doing it's to go to China, and so
you just need a video playing full screen.
Mm-hmm.
I've done it single Mac Mini with headless, so I remote into it. I play the video. I capture the window. I put it into OBS. I virtual cam out of OBS. I launch a Zoom client and I send that into the Zoom client. Now it's in the Zoom meeting. So it's the least amount of hardware. And it's completely headless. I don't have to have two displays, blah, blah, blah. Runs real easy.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, a question like this, the one person that on the planet would have been you that I would have brought this question to. And so what that does for me is say, Grant, you found a value in Office Hours, and it's beyond your own experience. Which,
how are you approaching it right now, Grant?
Well, it's just a job that came through, a very simple little job, which is they're live streaming to the world on Vimeo, but except for China, they want to do it in Zoom, which makes a lot of sense, and I support the idea. just have a feed come from Vimeo and then put it into Zoom. And so I was thinking along those lines. But Sky, the thing is that you never want to be at the point where you think you have all the answers. And the point is that I think with office hours is that the more that we learn, the less we know, right? And so we've been doing office hours for a long time now, and I really don't know very much.
Thank you for bringing your wisdom, knowledge, and your sense of humor.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I do have to ask, can you bring it into China that way, or are you going to run into other problems?
No, that's the secret. The secret is not
Works
the secret.
great.
It works great. Yeah, that's the way we get stuff into China. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK is up next. He says, is there a wireless headphone and microphone headset with a better sounding microphone than the Aftershokz OpenComms on a sub $250 budget?
Go ahead, John.
The Logitech G Pro has an actual pretty decent microphone built into it. It's kind of big, but good microphone. It's Blue Yeti, I think, is the actual maker of the microphone portion of the headset. Definitely an LG product. So interesting. Had some good luck with those in the past.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. And Douglas says, what have your experiences been with Behringer support? I've been looking at the wing, but concerned about support.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've never really had to use very much Behringer support because I found their products to work pretty well. The forums that you find online can give you a great deal of help. And if you go to their support page, it seems to have some very nice stock photos there of helpful people. Look like they're helping all kinds of people there. So at least they have a nicely designed web page and portal to order parts, find frequently asked questions, and ask people how to fix things. So I think they'd be pretty responsive as far as tech support, but I don't personally have any experience having to call them yet.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I've had some experience with them. The reseller support is really the best channel. Direct from Behringer does not work well. And with them kind of moving on from their integration partners, the support has definitely changed dramatically. I typically go to Sweetwater because I trust their support now for any Behringer product, but you're really relying on the reseller to put the pressure there.
Yeah, Sweetwater is the best place to go if you're going to need actual support for your hardware, and it's still, especially if it's still in warranty. I would definitely contact Sweetwater. I've gotten a lot of stuff from them. Anyway, next question.
Sean Johnson in New York is up next. He says, has anyone used 3 or more PTZ cameras in a studio environment to record panel discussions or talk show style productions? What about teleprompter hoods for them?
Go ahead, Chris.
Sean, I want to address the teleprompter portion. You say talk show. Discussion. Normally, you don't want to put prompters on a camera when it's a discussion. I used to quite often we'd hide teleprompter feeds, behind a panel, behind a bush, right over somebody's shoulder, so it kind of works with the sight line. And also, you should remember that you don't need to mount the camera, the prompter on the camera. It just needs to be in front of it. Now, if it's stationary, you'll limit the amount that you can pan, but I have done it many times where we just mount the prompter on its own pole separate from the camera. And if you don't have to pan a lot, that will work.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, same thing here. In fact, a lot of times when you're doing a talk show style, it's usually one person's sitting like this and the other person's sitting like this, and so you can have kind of a monitor and kind of cheat the PTZ, so it kind of looks like they're looking at it, but that they're more focused on looking at the person that they're talking to. That's what we did with when Build Day Live was doing the enterprise. Back and forth building at the site. So we would use 3 PTZ cameras. The other thing to notice, you don't normally go 180 degrees with a PTZ camera in a normal shoot. So anything behind the camera, you should be able to set up and use in many different ways. And of course, have it as positionable as possible, set it up, and then leave it alone. So you have it in position as you go from person to person.
Go ahead, Grant.
I just challenge you a little on what it is that you're trying to capture, because we've been used to seeing these types of panel discussion or discussions, but I feel like the world has changed a little bit, and we've talked about this a bit before in the idea that our audience is in the middle of conversations so much now that it really changes when we go back to the old school model. And so all I'd say at the minimum, think about how you get the most out of the panelists, more so than setting them up on a stage and making it work for your cameras. How do you get the discussion to work best? Sometimes it's like tub chairs in a half circle. It's not going to be as good as when they're engaging nice and closely. But ideally, you get the audience right in the middle of that.
Sorry, Courtney.
Yeah, Fenwick covered most of the teleprompter issues. You're not going to really find a teleprompter that'll mount on a single unit PTZ camera. You can mount smaller PTZ cameras in back of the teleprompter hood so that shooting through the teleprompter. You're limited, of course, since it's not panning with the camera. You're going to run into vignetting if you try and pan left or right or too far up or down, but you can reframe and zoom in just fine as long as the teleprompter is pointed in the right direction of your talent. There are robotic heads, which of course you'll find used on newsroom sets that are robotic pan tilt heads, and then you mount a full-size camera and teleprompter on that robotic head, but it has to be a fairly heavy head designed for carrying a teleprompter, and that's going to run into a lot of money, so you're not going to use that.
Go ahead, Bill.
Having done teleprompter with a lot of amateur talent, I hate them with a passion that is as white and hot as the sun. I think it kills naturalness in almost every case, unless it's an actual presenter who has learned how to do that. Or the second case where I'll use them is if somebody has to deliver technical stuff that has been vetted by so many lawyers that they have to get every single term and tense correct. Outside of that, I think people should just talk to people. A teleprompter for the host who has got to read some stuff makes sense to me. But after that, the one caveat now that we're using teleprompter to see people, like if I'm looking at my teleprompter, I'm looking at you. I like that for eye contact, but for teleprompting, for text rolling on the screen, I still try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I own this below the lens model as well that can be helpful for robotic heads because you're able to still move it around without it smashing into anything like you would inside of one of the other models that they have, which is completely sealed. So the eye line isn't going to be perfect, but it just depends on how the host is viewing it. And nowadays with these large sensor cameras, you really got to ask yourself, do I really want to spend the money on the high-end PTZ cameras? Because the ones that look gorgeous are like the UE150s. They're in the $10,000 range. So to get a really nice look versus a $1,000 camera with a good lens, you really got to ask yourself if it's worth it. And I do understand, though, if you want three that match, because there is a seamless, nice cutting action that you get when you get three of the same exact cameras.
Hey, go ahead, Chris.
I've really come to enjoy the intimacy of these, face-to-face conversations. And like Grant said, being in the middle of the conversation is absolutely amazing. Last week, I cut a two-person sit down. They were sitting in a white studio having a conversation where it was, I had forgotten what it felt like, but because these two people had such a respectful relationship, it was the CEO and one of the C-level people, and they were talking and reminiscing and telling stories and stuff, and watching them interact that way, the relationship, not necessarily the intimacy of the conversation. I had forgotten what that was like, and it was really nice, but 99% of the time, I totally agree with what Grant was saying. I would hate to think that this type of conversation would go away as COVID starts to lift.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this panel itself, and I know we've kind of veered off, so we'll come back to the question itself. But we've got 10 people here, I think, that are all talking, 10 or 11 people that are all talking. Imagine that in the real world. Like, and we have this very comfortable conversation. Our audio is good. You see us head and shoulder. You're not looking at the back of any of our heads. The audio, it works. It's not bleeding into one mic to the other. And so when I think about roundtables now, I really think about that. The other things to think about for roundtables are, we were asked to do these in the rounds that I thought was crazy. And it's the only way I'll do them if you let me, at this point. So when that was something that Richard Branson liked to do, have these everybody in a circle, and what we found was it didn't work as well because we had never done it before. So it worked pretty well, but we were like, oh, this is really cool. But having everybody in a circle, and the key is odd numbers, 5, 7, 3, because you can shoot the gaps. So now you have cameras and you can have, and now you're shooting the gaps, which means you're not seeing any of the other cameras, but you are getting this head-on shot of every person. And we used it, if you look back in the Pixel Core YouTube, and Chris has been on it and Bill's been on it, but we had the Final Cut virtual user group. And in that space, you were able to, we were just talking. And I just felt like it was a very comfortable for us. It was really comfortable because you're not looking down like this. We were just looking at each other, talking actually on computers. And then for the viewer, I think you just got a much more intimate kind of feel. So I would really look at that, and that takes some of the pressure off. I do see a reason for teleprompters. You do have to be very good at them, but they're really nice for the intros and the outros. Like, these are the things I got to say, or these are the next question. So we have a teleprompter view from Makana that we don't use much here, but we have a teleprompter view so they can just look up, okay, we got the next question, here it is. And they have somewhere to read it off. So those are things that are, I do find the teleprompters are useful. This is one that we had, and we had the teleprompter separate. You can see it there. Our next move before we close this up was to put it onto one of those telemetrics heads, but the heads weren't strong enough. So what we did is, you can get 15-inch teleprompters that will, and if you get the larger telemetrics heads, they'll sit on there and they'll just move with it. But if you want a larger one, then you start getting ones with hoods. It's a PTZ hood that'll go around it. So those are the ways that you can kind of go down that path, especially if you're using all-in-one like the 150 or the BRC 1000 or the Canons, you're going to want to put it inside of a hood. That's the best way to do that. And Prompter People makes the hoods that I've seen in the past. You can definitely build them. And then Fenwick's showing you here pictures of what it looks like when we just do it in the round, which all of us were sharing.
One time you did it with an even number of people. Here you got 6 people, and it didn't work as well.
Didn't work at all. I think that was because someone showed up that we didn't expect. Yeah, like it was like we were being accommodating, and I think after that it was like, we're never doing that again. Like it did not work.
It wasn't. I want
to know what you were so interested in here. You look quite interesting.
I have no idea. No idea. It was probably acting.
Responding to Mark, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is next, and he says, is there any compelling reason for video to be $29.97 or $59.94 anymore, or is it simply that 30 and 60 are easier for, say, YouTube?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the reason is, of course, it's the broadcast standard. So if you ever want to put your video on the air somewhere, it's going to have to conform in the United States. It's going to have to conform to the broadcast standard, which is $29.97 or $59.94 time base. And usually it's still interlaced.
Go ahead, David.
Yep. And to Courtney's point, the existing infrastructure at all those broadcasters is the compelling reason why it's going to stay that way for a bit.
Yeah. And I literally had this problem yesterday. Traditional infrastructure that could not play a 30p image. So I had to we got it from somebody else, not from us. And it was, they were like, we can't play 30p. We need 29.97. So that is the problem, is if you want to go any traditional infrastructure, you have to be able to do 59.94 and 29.97 if it's broadcast. Next question.
Next question. Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, an article about a supercomputing trade show mentioned an audience of millions online, quote and close quote, for an event. What's the secret to delivering digital-first events to extreme scale audiences without issues?
John.
A very good CDN. You got to get that content around the globe, and you got to be able to manage that through some sort of either the AWS video production stuff or Azure's. I've used both. Not to millions, but definitely a good CDN is going to be the key to that backbone.
And go ahead, Chris.
I'm just going to say I don't believe the article at all. I mean, really, supercomputers and an audience of millions?
Yeah.
I don't think the Venn diagram.
Big word. Yeah,
I'm calling.
Yeah.
No.
I'm calling space. No. So the to answer the question specifically, though, you are now getting into a rarefied atmosphere of who you can use to stream it. I would say I would not stream. So I've done streams that are north of 10 million viewers, and once you go over, it's all pretty easy. Once you go over about 5 million people, and you want to have control, so you can do it inside of YouTube. YouTube will handle it. I mean, people always go like, there might be 10,000 people. Do you think YouTube can handle it? I'm like, yeah, that's going to be okay. I mean, YouTube will handle, without any real thought process. YouTube, we've gone up to 1.5 million, 2 million viewers, and YouTube doesn't even think about it. Like, it's not, the infrastructure is so big that it's not going to handle it. I think the most viewed the last time I checked was like I don't know if anything's past the Stratus jump, but that was like 8.5 million or 9 million or something like that. So when you go over that, though, you're talking about Akamai, Azure, and AWS. I wouldn't probably put it on anything else. Anybody else is going to back themselves up with that. And at that level, you have to start thinking about a whole new set of things. So you have to think about, like, for instance, when you're streaming at that level, you're not streaming RTMP to something and having it convert for you. You're streaming the HLS. You're doing an HLS ladder. So you're sending the ladder out of all the versions are generated from you. You can't have it doing that for you unless it's YouTube or something like that. And then the big thing, though, is you have to start thinking about segment size. So there's people who want to do segment size of like 2 seconds, but the problem is that if 2 second segment size creates a lot of data. There's a lot of data on the CDN. So you start lengthening out those segment sizes, which is going to make it less responsive, but it's also going to make it a lot more scalable. So those are the kind of things, and you'll work very closely with your CDN. At that level, you're paying a lot of money. And so they give you a whole team. there's a NOC, like Akamai has a NOC, and you're going to be talking to the NOC, and there's like 3 or 4 people that are paying attention to you. And you call and you say, you're going to pay ahead of time to reserve your bandwidth. Because what you don't want to do is, if I've got an event with 8 million and someone else has got an event with 8 million, it can start to, chunk things up a little bit. And so that becomes really at that level. Now, the thing that we haven't really figured out is how to do. So the largest event that I've done where we do high interactivity is about 150 to 200,000. So at that level, you can do a lot of exciting things. When you get over that, it's just so many, and so we're working on ways to solve that. But right now, you're mostly just talking to everybody, and you're getting out there. You can take it, but it's such a rush of people watching that it's a much different kind of event at that point, and you have to think about where you're going to find the audience that you're going to interact with. So you just have to subdivide them out so that there's a handful of 10 or 15 or 20,000 or 50,000 people that you're going to interact with, but you're not going to try to. There's some people that are just watching, because it's so much data. When we did a high interactivity with 150,000 people, we actually took down the database for the event within a very large CDN, because it was 130, 140,000 interactions a minute. And that was too many. So interactivity then becomes and we all saw the Apple event that will not be named, which I had nothing to do with. but the interactivity can be a complicated one. So anyway, those are the kind of things you have to think about when you get to the atmosphere. But it's an entirely different problem than what we're dealing with here. And I don't know if it's that necessary, to be honest. I think that there's a real power to lots of events that are at 50 or 100,000 or 200,000, but this is where broadcast does really well. Like old-fashioned broadcast and satellites and downlinks and everything else, they have this part figured out. Because what we think is like 5 million. I mean, if you have a show that gets 5 million on a major broadcaster, they're going to drop that show. Like that, like 4 or 5 million, they're going to drop that show. For us, it's like the biggest show I ever worked on, so they work at an entirely different scale. Next question.
Tony Mobley, our friend in Noonan, Georgia, says, how do I stream it'll be a House of Worship Zoom meetings from my ATEM Mini Pro to House of Worship YouTube channels?
Go ahead, Grant.
So I read it as you're the event is happening in Zoom and you want to get it into the ATEM and then off to YouTube. And if that's the case, then the interesting thing about Zoom is that there are slight differences between Mac and PC. And one of those things is annoying on the Mac is that the second screen output has little things on it, right? And so it has like the little arrows that are the expand arrows always stay on. And the pin stays on as well. If you happen to have someone pinned, it's got the remove pin thing there. On a PC, that is not the case. And so my recommendation is a PC, a laptop that's plugged into your ATEM, and then you're running that as the extended desktop, and you're running a second screen, which is the active speaker in Zoom, and that's going full screen with a clean interface into the ATEM, and then you're doing your ATEM settings to be able to stream to YouTube directly from that, and you can cut in your images and your whatever else on the ATEM.
And we're going to jump to David here in a second. I have a little 911 that I have to jump out even a little earlier than I expected. Bill, I'm going to hand this off to you. And for the audience, we still could use more questions. Don't put these guys on the spot. They will talk. There's 11 questions. Throw a couple more in there for them. Keep them honest. All right. And it may be a hard turn at 9. Might be just a touch before 9 before when I do that. All right. Thanks.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Alex. All right, we're moving to David Brady now. David.
Yeah, Tony, I'm doing the same thing from my place. I'm documenting it this week to train people. Schedule the event in YouTube first, grab that key, plug it into the ATEM, and route everything that way. Hit me up in after hours if you want. We'll talk.
Moving on to Jeffrey Powers. Jeffrey?
Zoom OSC, Zoom ISO. I just did this last week where I brought it in because what I've done, and of course we've done this in after hours when Alex was away, was I would have a laptop, and then that laptop would come into another computer using third-party software, in this case Wirecast or vMix, however you want to use it, and then that would go streaming out. But with the fact that you're using the Mac Mini, you're probably going to use your Mac Mini. Get a pluggable device, and then you'll have two instances. The first one being probably the pastor, the main camera, I guess you could call it, and then the second one being the Zoom panel, or if you need to do up to 4 cameras, you can do 4 cameras individually. And of course, if you have the Extreme, then you have the ability to do super sources, so you could have a couple different situations right there, and then bring in overlays and graphics in from there, and then send it out. So that might be the best way if you're not really concerned of how it doesn't look like a Zoom call or whatever. Then it's even easier to do that way.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I'd say just to kick it right out of Zoom straight to YouTube and bring your ATEM Mini in as a source, unless you need 1080p. That's when I would go through all the trouble of scraping it. But knowing Tony and knowing the tech and the volunteers behind the scenes on this, I would just go straight live out of Zoom to YouTube, and then the ATEM Mini. If you need to put in, graphics or something like that, unless you need like overlays, you can do that just with an ATEM Mini input. But yeah, I'd keep it simple. I think you're overthinking it, trying to do it with all the screen scraping and whatnot.
Thanks for the question, Tony. And moving on to the next one from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And it is to John Pretto specifically. He says, can we have an update on the rocket launch project, please?
George, thank you for the question. I have to hold this in abeyance until early next week. We have a team meeting today, and I've got some special things to talk to and share with the guys. And so ask me that same question on Monday.
Excellent. Chris Fenwick, though, has a thought. Chris?
I will say it's going to be exciting because by redefining the definition of space, we will indeed make it to space. But we did have to redefine.
And just for those of you who are watching who don't know about it, maybe you don't come to office hours all that much. There is a team inside, and I don't know whether it goes much outside of office hours, but who are working with John Pretto, who's here on the panel. John is in Las Vegas, and they are going to be launching a pretty substantial rocket, not NASA type rocket, but something bigger than your little Estes backyards by factors of magnitude. And we're all pretty excited about that because we're hoping that there's an interlink with office hours and we get to maybe see something live, get to see some telemetry about it. It's all still coming together, but we're all pretty excited about what John is doing out in Las Vegas with the help of a lot of folks who you might see on the show regularly. So we're looking forward to that and speak to the rocket.
You may be familiar with the Kármán line. We have created our own definition. We call it the lower Fenwick line. It's a little bit lower than the Kármán.
So you now get an upper Fenwick and a lower Fenwick and a different lower Fenwick. Boy. Okay, let's move on. David Barton in Memphis, USA says, Memphis, Tennessee, does anyone use metric halo audio interfaces? They are transparent, but they also feature onboard DSP. Could they be used in cases where Mixpre is unavailable? And John Wallace wants to get in on this.
I have not used this interface directly, but I didn't see anyone's hand raised. But the UAD Apollo series does a very similar thing. Looks to be much more affordable than the metric audio interfaces. But definitely lots of different options out there. You also can get into the Waves WSG stuff and then start integrating those plugins with any sort of interface. Pretty low latency as well.
Courtney.
Well, it's not really a portable device. It's designed to be rack mounted, although they can be DC powered. I believe they'll take 12 volts. They have a 4-pin DC in on them. But if you're going to just work in the studio, I think they would be fine replacement for a Mixpre 6. Mixpre 6 is really designed as a production portable recorder to be used either on a cart or over your shoulder as you're walking around. So the metric halo probably wouldn't be suitable for that because they're too big. They're 19-inch rack mount units.
Yeah, I use the Universal Audio Apollo Solo. They have the Apollo Duet. They have other versions of this. And part of the power of them is that they have a lot of onboard RAM. You can buy them in different, add-ons. But the amount of RAM you have determines on how many of your plugins, which are written to use that RAM onboard the outboard device as opposed to you asking your computer to do the digital signal processing. So you can run concurrently more plugins, do more layers of effects by virtue of moving that processing off onto the outboard unit than you would otherwise be able to do and not bog down your host computer, which can be really useful when it's doing a lot of other things like running giant Zoom calls. So let's move on to the next one. Comes from Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California, very close to me here. Yesterday, during the second hour, the cutter switched to a supersource 2-up and 3-up in the Zoom webinar, not office hours 2.0. How was that done? And Guy Cochran's going to take a shot at this.
It's magic. Totally magic. No, it was just the default tools that are built into Zoom webinar. So it was just Spotlight and then add Spotlight to the second person. So I just right-clicked on their head and then added them to the Spotlight. And then there's also a little thing that'll pop up to remove Spotlight, so you can quickly go back to active speaker. And then on the Streamdeck, I have speaker view and Zoom gallery as a button, so I can quickly switch. So it was a lot of mouse and a lot of Streamdeck yesterday because I'm not using Zoom ISO. One thing that is interesting though is if you jump into Facebook, the Zoom events page, there's this lady, Denise, who is doing something new in Zoom webinar called the backsplash image. So I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but this will allow you to do the 2-up or 3-up or however many up you want to do, plus the backsplash image. And then she's also doing something with name tags. And then I would, we're against the virtual backgrounds, but she's forcing people to use an automatic virtual background for that consistency. So something worth looking at. I haven't done this yet. I want to play with this in Zoom webinar, but it looks like it's just a default. But yeah, that was a fun show to cut yesterday. It was a little rough, but still fun.
I was going to say the TLDR of it was Guy being awesome, as he often is. And this is, for those of you who are watching, this is why, because even though he's very, very good at this, he never stops learning. If there's one thing you can take out of office hours from particularly, I think a lot of us who've been around the business for a long time, that's, I think, a signature you see of all of us and many other people who do this kind of work, is that you just constantly keep adding to your storehouse of information. And that's one of the things that's exciting about this whole field. David Brady has a thought.
Yeah, I was actually watching on the YouTube stream and I was happy to see that multi-spotlight because I'll use it at work all the time. The only thing that's tricky is the sequence of bringing the look in and out, because sometimes if you're sharing content that way and adding participants, and then you remove participants, it shifts where people go when they come back in. So it's better than nothing, but it's good stuff though. Thanks for using it.
That was an issue with the order that you click on them. So yesterday, you'll notice that there was one spot where the back of the piano player went to the other screen. So he started off on the left side, and then on the next cut he was on the right side, which in film term, you wouldn't do that. It's like, it's just
You're
not
crossing the line.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh no, I got to remove all spotlights, click on him first, then add Todd Reynolds to the second one. So it was fun cutting though.
It looked great. It looked absolutely fabulous. And it was great to have you on there in a show that was special already by virtue of the people that we were dealing with. Let's move.
One quick one. How did that impact what Alex and the rest of the panel saw? Because it sometimes can drive people a little bonkers, or no?
Well, I think sometimes we're watching, I don't know, depends on how people watch the feeds. I was seeing some of it. I think the office hours, was the 2.0 feed up yesterday? Seems like there was something where I was watching some of what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe it's just I was assuming that since Guy was doing this special switching in the regular feed, and that's what my normal office hours 2.0 feed. So it didn't draw my eye away from the show very much, but I just thought it looked fabulous. Overall, well done, team. Let's move on to the next question. Douglas Carmichael's up next. And Douglas says, what table stands would be useful to elevate a compact keyboard, a Yamaha MODX6, on the desktop? So not the X stands that we normally see for players. John Wallace will start us.
I have a K&M adjustable stacker, and then there's a mounting brace that goes to kind of put it on the desk. I've had some success with that. It allows you to mount two different keyboards, one on the base and then one at the top. And you can kind of adjust to whatever your feel is. It's also easy to build something very simple, if you're just looking to elevate the back of it, to kind of get easy access to controls if playing is still pretty easy when it's laying on your desk.
Probably a better solution than mine, which is always Amazon boxes. Courtney Gooden?
What I've done is I've used something like this, which is a laptop stand, and I've extended the cross pieces out, and I've got my Behringer Poly D sitting above my Kurzweil on one of these, and they're pretty cheap and they work pretty well, and they hold medium to small size synths if you want to stack one above another or get it up off your desk.
We see Jeffrey's a musician. He's got another view at this. Jeffrey?
It really depends on how you're going to be playing the keyboard. That's the important thing. If you're just doing one hands to do simple lines and things like that, it could actually be on top of your desktop without a problem, or on a stand like Courtney was showing. If you're doing two hands, then you want to actually be in a position where your hands will be set so you can actually play comfortably. Now, the first time that I ever used a keyboard with a computer was when I was in college. And they just had standard desks, but instead of a pull-out keyboard mouse tray, they had a extended keyboard tray that you could just pull out the whole keyboard, do your playing, and then push it back in, so it was completely out of the way. So it really depends, once again, how you play and where how comfortable you would be where that keyboard is for this to work. But those were the three things that I was thinking.
David Brady.
And Quick Lock makes a pretty neat little tabletop monolith, I think is the line, adjustable in height. Might be a thing to look into. Quick Lock, QUIKLOK.
There you go. Jen's in Sandpoint, Idaho has our next question here this morning. Has anyone else had an ATEM freeze up after a long DHCP lease renewal? I had one freeze to the point of dropping a YouTube stream multiple times leading up to an event this week. As soon as we gave the ATEM a static IP address in the router, it was fine. So let's look and see if there's anybody. John Wallace is here from the diagnostic team. John?
I would definitely always recommend using a static IP. Lots of things are happening within that handshake for a DHCP request that could get in the way of transmitting that data, including reestablishing connection if it's interrupting anything. So I think you went down the right path. Going with a static IP is always the right choice.
I think /network engineer is something we're going to have to, so many people are needing to add to their curriculum vitae these days because everything is migrating off into the web. And without at least some basic idea of at least the terminology used, it's easy to get lost. Let's move on to the next question here. Gualberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia is up next. Ideas on a versatile combo for a mobile cam. And he's looking for a camera, lens, transmitter, stabilizer, all within a budget. He doesn't specify what that budget is, so I think the goal here is to try to keep it as affordable as possible. Jeffrey?
Let's trying to put it all together before that. But basically, if you have the Mevo Start works as a wireless IP NDI camera. And then I've done this before. I've put it onto regular tripods and then just moved around. When I was at CES, that's what I did. But then you get a simple stabilizer. This is the Hohem multi-stabilizer, so I could actually put in not only a phone camera, but I'll also a GoPro or the Mevo Start for that matter. And then I can have that completely stabilized. And then, of course, it sends an NDI signal to whatever source goes from there.
So you're basically saying the camera should do that, and then the gimbal is their stabilizer. The Mevo has the transmitter built in and a lens that all go together.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the next question since I don't see anything else on this one. Douglas Carmichael appears next. He says, which of the two major cloud CDNs, AWS or Azure, would be the most marketable to learn? David Brady is going to start us off there.
I'm going to say AWS just for this breadth that they have, but Azure definitely in the corporate environment. So it all depends on where you want to tap into. But both are good to learn if you can handle them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's complex. Would you recommend, David, that people take actual courses in this, or is there a way of self-study that people can kind of come up to speed by reading?
For AWS, there are some self-starter courses that I believe you can get with a free account just to get going. I still have yet to do it, and that's one of my goals for 2022.
Okay, fair enough. Guy Cochran.
Yeah, the AWS Skill Builder courses are amazing. I have a couple of our employees that are taking them. There's some 16-hour ones just to get started. So there's Cloud Practitioner. And the nice thing is that you get a little LinkedIn, like I've completed this certification. So it's nice for potential employers to know that you've gone through these accreditations. And Azure's just, it's not set up as well for what we do. AWS seems to really work well with NDI. I would also look at Google Cloud. I've got that flowing with NDI between various GPU-based units. But yeah, AWS is where it's at for production.
I can't stop laughing because just this morning in my inbox, I don't know how I missed it 3 months ago, but I got my certification sticker from John Pretto for Office Hours Video. If you've been watching for a while, you know we had a little weird little thing where John had some nice certificates printed out, and I'm gonna print that and put it on my wall because it's just lovely. Doesn't mean anything more than the fact that it's lovely, but it's lovely. We're moving on to Dave in Alexandria, Virginia for the next question. What's the easiest way to share my iPad screen to my MacBook Pro and use it as a video source in OBS? So Chris Fenwick's going to take this shot at this one.
So, Dave, you want to be careful, first of all. Many people will tell you, don't use OBS on a Mac. It's horrible. I use it every day. I'm using it right now. Be careful that you don't ask for it to do too much. That's my first admonition using OBS on a Mac. Secondly, to do your iPad thing, there's an app called NDI HX Capture. And essentially, you launch that, you click a thing, you do a deal, and as long as the iPad is on the same network as your MacBook Pro, then in the OBS, you create a new scene with an NDI catcher, and then you select your iPad. Your iPad will show up as one of the sources available in the NDI catcher, and boom, you're in. And then you can scale it and position it. You can even fit the screen because I think the iPad's going to be 4:3 aspect ratio. You're probably broadcasting at 16:9, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be an issue. Pillars and bars and bears on my.
Chris, what would you suggest are the biggest things to make sure that OBS runs without giving you too many problems? Is it memory? Do you want to shut down other things before you launch it? Are there things you've learned as tricks to keep it more stable?
Don't ask it to do a whole lot. I mean, do the bare minimum. I think, as is the case with any digital switcher, where you launch an application and you say, I want to add an input, I want to add a scene, I want to add a lower third, I want to add a thing. You can very quickly overrun the technical capabilities of the computer. And that depends on your computer, your network, your RAM, the color of your keyboard. There's a million things that can affect that. So you need to test it extensively. I mean, the best test I've done is a couple hours every morning here on office hours. And I run, it's not perfect. Everybody here will tell you they've seen, I have modified the, if I turn off the virtual cam to get OBS into Zoom, I have this screen. And this little screen pops up much shorter than what I just showed you a couple of times a day. So you might want to, now that's a customized screen. It's a little bit of a nerd fest to dig into the Finder and find where to change that. But you might want to make it, black so it's not obnoxious in a live event. But you can't ask it to do a whole lot. Just be careful and test it extensively.
Thanks. Good answer. Let's move on to the next question here. Werner in Warsaw, Poland is up next. And Werner says, I'm getting myself confused. I've always had my Zoom video output set at mirror my video. Is this the best practice? I started using a little logo via my ATEM, and I suspect I've been pushing out my logo in reverse to my clients. Chris Fenwick first, then David Brady after that. So Chris, go ahead.
Werner, I'm pretty certain that the mirror my video is just for your view. And it has to do with, oh, I want to fix my hair, whatever. I think you're fine.
David Brady?
I think that it does toggle, because if I flip it here, I'm flipping it what I see. So it's more for your own perception.
Correct. We don't see you flipping it.
Right. So it's as if you were looking in a mirror. So my right hand is here, but when I look at my Zoom, I see it on my left. And that's where it's confusing, where people are like, what's that thing over your left shoulder? And it's like, no, the other left. So,
but the good news is it's not affecting their audience. Nothing changes for them, even if it changes for you. Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So anything you add in the ATEM, since the ATEM is if you're using the output of the ATEM via USB, then it'll be coming into Zoom as a video camera. Then it will not be reversed on the way out. So your logo in the corner should read correctly.
Nice. Okay, let's move on. Andre Dalle in Berlin is up next. He says, which general management tool can the panel recommend? There are so many task mails messages to be handled that I lose oversight very quickly using a PC, Mac, Android, and iOS. Are there any cost-effective solutions, or suggestions? We're going to start with John Wallace, but I got to tell you, this drives me crazy every single day, because I think I have a message. It appeared on notifications, it went away, and I have to figure out which of the 7 message feeding services I have that silly thing came from, and it sometimes takes me 5 minutes to find it. But John, start us out with what you use for helping with task management.
Yeah, for me, it's about building systems that can be sustainable for you. So like I'll use Azure DevOps. We have an access to it for free, so I can kind of put my backlog of everything I want to handle, what's in flight, where it's at, what stages. And then when I'm managing emails, I'm going and anything I have to respond to, I'm moving into a folder that I can kind of get rid of. Anything that I'm CC'd or not exactly to or part of a group, I'm moving that out of my inbox so I can really see what the actionable things I need to take care of. I'm removing notifications from anything that's non-critical. As much as I love Discord, if that was pushing to my phone all day, I'm going to miss a lot of stuff that actually matters. So it's really about reducing the noise as much as possible, and then creating that backlog of you, whether it's writing down a piece of paper, all the things that you want to do, or using a software suite, anything to kind of build a system that you can follow is going to make you successful.
So you're using all essentially the interface tools in your regular computer to do all this management, and not some suite that's designed to help you manage things?
Yeah, it's really about what systems work for me. And I haven't found a single solution that works well to manage all the different work and sources that we have. And so for me, it's about creating that process. And then off to the side, instead of me being a notepad, I use Azure DevOps to create a backlog list, but you could use Jira or Asana or any sort of project management tool. That I like a Kanban board where I can kind of line up all the work and what stages it's in, and I can quickly view what's on my plate.
Okay. Well, we don't have any other volunteers for anything else, so you might want to come back. I think this is a pretty big subject, and I'm really surprised there aren't more people using more tools, because the complexity of our digital lives, particularly what's coming in and what we have to interact with, I don't know if everybody's like me, but it seems like it keeps building and building and building every time I add a new service. Like I wasn't on Discord before 8-10 months ago, and then suddenly it's a part of my life, and I have to manage how things are coming into Discord and when I should turn my attention to my stuff from Discord, and it'll ping into certain parts of my daily computing life, but it won't ping into other parts. And if I don't manage that correctly, I can miss things that I really want to see, and I don't see that getting any easier as we go along. Sometimes it's going to get probably more complicated. And I'm kind of surprised that as the content distribution people and the movie people are doing all these content aggregators, and I can see a lot of the other services through Amazon Prime, or I can see some of the other services through Apple TV, there isn't more of that companies trying to consolidate these streams of communication into a simpler, easier to use interface. Chris, do you have a thought before we move on?
I tell my clients that if you send me anything important, you have to text message me, because I will absolutely miss the email.
So that's your direct, I'm going to look at this every day, come heck or high water.
No, 100 times a day. So I currently have 546 unlistened to voicemails. I have something in the neighborhood of like 60,000 unread emails, and I have 3 text messages. Which one do you think I check more often?
I hear all of Chris's friends going, that's why he never got back to me about that birthday party in 2020.
Don't send me an email without sending me a text message.
Okay, fair enough. So, but that's interesting, because that means that we all have that aspect of our digital footprint. How do you want to receive messages? And there's no formal way to communicate that. So I guess you have to do it individual. A guy had some thoughts too.
Yeah, Mickey's not here on the panel, so I'll throw his that he turned me on to, which is Clear. So it's an app. I think it's like $10, but I've started to use that. It's very handy for things that you know that you'll forget if you don't put it in there. So and it has a nice little swipe feature when you're done. There's something nice about like, whoosh, and it just.
Can you describe
away.
what is it? An app? Is it a
it's
site?
An app
it's an app.
So it's an app, and then you can have it go to multiple devices. The other one that we use at the office is Basecamp. And so Basecamp allows us to do things like checkboxes, but more importantly, since it's in the cloud and it is expensive, well, it's $100 a month, but it's very nice for team, because anybody can, like if there's back orders, we'll have like a list of everybody with the order number. And then if there's any notes, we can drill right into that and put a note if there was tracking or if the customer called. So there's some nice stuff in Basecamp for keeping track of stuff, because on the enterprise level, we have something way more robust, but it was even so hard to figure out. NetSuite's like super complicated, but Basecamp, super simple. Clear, super simple. And then I've seen Ash showed some of us in for the space project, I think it was Jira, and Asana's Jira, and that very complicated as well. I mean, unless you're used to that kind of stuff, if you get into that type of environment, you're used to that kind of flow like John Wallace was talking about, then yeah, Asana Jira would be the other one.
Well, the sales side of the world, it has long had all those customer relationship management tools that are incredibly broad in depth. But in fact, I think that's how Salesforce became Salesforce, by managing a lot of that kind of contact ebb and flow. So it's interesting. Courtney had some thoughts too.
Since he specifically said he's using a PC, Mac, Android, and iOS, covering all the bases, I'd go with something Google-based or browser-based. I use Google Calendar to organize all my calendars. I have multiple calendars, some for business, some for personal. You can share the business calendar with other members of the company so that they can always post something on the calendar. They know an event is coming up because it's on their calendar. And, of course, Gmail for managing email. I use Google Docs and Google Sheets, etc. for sharing documents and sheets, and Google Drive for distributing and controlling files that I have to send to different people and put them, even if they're large, I put them in Google Drive so that I can just send them a link and they can download it from there.
Yeah, and hopefully
but it's not a CMS,
hopefully the things like the ICS files that seem to be pretty universal. I know I can import them into Mac stuff, and I get them kind of all the time from all sorts of people on all sorts of systems, and at least they work for calendaring. Well, let's move on. I think that's a big subject and maybe worth a second hour at some point. John Snyder is up next on our regular questions. When is the Monday second hour topic decided and announced? To the best of my knowledge, that takes place in Alex's head, sometimes before that, usually well enough in advance so that we kind of know. Occasionally, and again, everybody here is a volunteer, so we all have our lives to live too. So sometimes I know Alex gets pretty super busy, and we don't know as far in advance as maybe we would like, but that's just the nature of the beast here. I'm pretty sure also that as office hours continues to grow and get more formalized, and we've done that over the course of the last 2 years, I was thinking about one of the early shows that we did and how much different things are now. We've come a tremendous distance, and in the back end, in terms of the crew working to help put the show on, because everybody thinks this is of value to the audience. It's miles ahead of where it used to be, but I think it's got miles to go. Guy Cochran had some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we really do drive the show. So if you go into the Discord, into the second hour request, and you see the ones that have been voted on are little emoticons like thumbs up or smileys. Some people get silly and put some funny stuff. But if it hits more than 10, it's almost definitely going to be a second hour. I don't know about specifically Monday, but it'll become a second hour. So Alex definitely looks at those and reaches out to the folks to get them worked into the schedule.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on. Chris in Wisconsin has the next question. He says, is there a simple solution a novice can manage for improving audio on iOS devices on Zoom, FaceTime, etc. calls, wired preferably for reliability? And John Wallace will start us off.
I've used the iConnectivity or Focusrite interfaces with iDevices. They work pretty well. It's definitely going to step up the audio from just the built-in microphone and then allow you to use whichever microphone and headset you would prefer.
Absolutely. And beyond that, whenever somebody starts talking about improving audio, I just want to make sure that they understand that the physics rules always work on every circumstance and every case, which is if you want to reduce background noise and increase the signal to noise ratio for speaking into anything, lowering the distance between your mouth, if you're talking, and the pickup, whether that's on a phone, whether it's on a microphone, whether it's anywhere, will do more to increase the good signal to noise ratio, eliminate noise, and add signal than any other single thing. Now, I understand if you're talking into a device and you have a camera there, holding it far enough away so that the camera can get the shot you want, when your microphone is tied to the camera in the same device, as happens sometimes with camcorders, with laptops, you sometimes have to split the difference. It's really why a second audio chain, which we call double system in the movie making business, it's divorcing the audio recording and processing chain from the video processing chain. That's always been a standard, and it's because the position that's best for the camera is not always the position that's best for recording audio. So anything wired, if you're going to move your camera or your microphone off of the same point, then you start getting into the different kinds of connections you can make between a remote camera and your device that's processing your signal and sending it out. And you're getting into wired versus wireless, Bluetooth, and the problems or successes that come with that. And that's all developing real fast now. It used to be that I think my personal opinion was all of my wireless mics when I was starting out 25 years ago were all very expensive. We were using $1,000 plus transmitter receiver mic packs from companies like Letrasonics and Sony and others. And they were rarefied gear. We're gotten down to the point now where you can get decent audio wireless chains for substantially less than that. Those are still out there. And sometimes if you absolutely need to make sure it works, spending good money on audio is always, I think, an extraordinarily good investment. But some of these things like the little Rode Go's and things like that, under the right circumstances and in the right environments, can work really well for people. And a lot of people do videos and do recordings, particularly for the web and things on those, and they get good results out of them. But it's a complicated thing. And so I applaud you for paying attention to wanting your audio to be good. It is probably the single biggest improvement you can make in your presentations that will affect the audience's appreciation, understanding, and the success of your content over anything else. All right, I've been talking too long. Let's move on to the next one here. Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, what camera besides Blackmagic that records in 30 rather than 29.97 that you would recommend to use with an ATEM Mini Extreme? David Brady's going to start us off.
I don't know if everybody's going to agree, but I'm using a Lumix GX85. It does 4K at 30. People say it looks good, so you be the judge. But
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, red camera. You got to get red. You know, it's just, all the cool kids got red, so just get a red. Yeah, Chris, you didn't say a budget, so I'd say look at some.
I prefer the Millennium DXL. I think the red's too cheap.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, Greg Gibson was telling me about this new Sony mirrorless. I think it was the A7 IV. It's expensive. It's like $6,000. But it just depends on what you need. But for what he was talking about in our conversation, led to just the gorgeous autofocus. So he needs, when he's doing his, he mostly does virtual events, but he has had to do some in person. And he was talking about this lens that went on this camera. So it was a servo Sony lens. And he was able to have it face detect, and he said it was just amazing. I mean, if you're doing a lot of these shots, or if you've ever had to follow somebody, and especially through a crowd or through other people on a stage, you know what I'm talking about, where it's hard to nail focus. And so I'd be looking at reviews of people or footage online and YouTube videos and things like that to see what other folks are saying about these cameras. But yeah, you can't go wrong with the Canons. The R5 would be another one I'd be looking at. It just depends. And then Zcam has some nice stuff. I'm using a Zcam right now. Some of these, it just depends on your budget as far as is it going to be Micro Four Thirds? Do you own any Micro Four Thirds lenses already? Do you have native glass that's expensive that you don't want to have to convert? Because sometimes in that conversion you might lose some of the functionality like aperture control and things like that. So I would keep asking here. I mean, this is a great place to ask. We'll see what other folks say. John.
Big subject, though. John Wallace is next.
Yeah, the Sony A series, whether it's the 6400s or you get to like the A7 3s and 4s with the full frame, both those are great cameras. They even have some more affordable models that get down to, I think, as low as $500 or $600 that can really output some great quality images for the price.
And Courtney.
And if you're looking specifically for integer 30 frames per second, not 29.97, be careful because a lot of cameras will just say 30 frames and it'll actually be 29.97. So that's where your Decimator MDHX will come in handy. You can plug the output of your camera into that and it'll tell you whether it's actually 30 or 29.97 or 23.98 versus 24.
Right. And for those of you who are still, why didn't they just make it that way? This goes back to the history. I'm not going to do a long history thing, but it has to do with all video used to be black and white, and they had to put color on top of it. And for legitimate engineering reasons, 29.97 became the cadence of broadcast. And as much as we dislike it, there are TV stations all around the world that use either NTSC or PAL that have these fractional frame rates that they're just legacy. They're out there. And if you want to play in that, if you want to make your stuff compatible with going on a broadcast television station to reach the audience that they have links to, you have to play that game. It's just how it works.
PAL is always integer. It's not
fractional. Oh, that's right. But 24, 23.976. Well, anyway.
25. You normally
25. Oh, that's right. PAL isn't 25. I wasn't thinking. I've never had to deal with PAL, thank goodness. Although all of you and the rest of the world who love it, good for you. John Pretto in Las Vegas is up next. Did anyone see the Harley-Davidson virtual event this week? And if so, discuss. Did anybody? Let's see. John Pretto has his name on this one.
So Harley did an event on Wednesday that was spectacularly cinematic, but it lacked any interactivity. I mean, it was a total, lean back content. It was very well done and shot and produced.
John, what was the purpose of it? Was it like a marketing and sales thing? Was it a?
They announced their new bikes for 2022.
Okay. So it was a product rollout.
Yeah. and light on statistics and zero interaction. So I thought that was a little frustrating.
I'm going to
But
bet a lot of hard cuts, a lot of beautiful scenery, a lot of bikes moving in singles and in packs around beautiful places with a lot of zoom, zoom.
that was it.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of marketing. It's what gets people excited. And they know their audience really well. I mean, that's why people are in that tribe, so to speak. And Lord knows the Harley tribe has been a tribe for as long as any of them have. It goes back to the 40s and 50s and beyond, and it's still going strong today. So it works. Let's move on to the next one. Jonathan Swan is up next in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. What USB switcher would the panel recommend for moving their mouse and keyboard across multiple devices? So I guess we're talking KVMs here. John Wallace is going to start.
I use a product from Synergy, so I don't actually use a USB switcher. I just do it over network. It's the best product that I've found to do it, and does it very reliably without having to touch any sort of buttons. And you can even lock it to one device if you choose, and then shortcut keys to kind of move into different devices as well, which is kind of game-changing for me.
Absolutely. David Brady?
+1 for Synergy, but for hardware, I've had an IO Gear device that does basic USB thing toggle between two devices. Comes in handy in a pinch, but Synergy is the way to go.
Okay, John Pretto.
The gentleman from Michigan is on the money today. Synergy. This is an iMac Pro. I have a PC, and I have 3 Raspberry Pis over there. I can drag my mouse all the way across all 5 machines. It's fantastic.
Okay, high praise indeed. Let's move on to the next question. Comes from Douglas Carmichael. We've mentioned using iPhones in production pipelines. Would most carriers allow purchasing an iPhone and charging the price to one's bill to pay in installments? And John Wallace is going to start us off.
Not just carriers, even Apple will let you do that for the low price of whatever carrier service that you are requiring. So you're looking at probably doubling the cost of the device. But if you're using it for production needs and it's meeting your needs, and you can defer that cost, and that's important to you, you can definitely do that.
And I'm going to weigh in on this one myself because we've just gone through this with all of our phones. We moved 4 months ago to a place where the service provider that we had before does not have particularly great coverage. They're a big service provider, but we came out here, our phones were not working particularly well, so we thought, let's move. Most of our phones were owned and off contracts, but some of them were not, and it's turned out that it's been a complicated process, more complicated than I would have expected, to switch providers on existing phone lines. If you have contracts running, you pretty much have to buy out the remainder of your contract. So if you've gotten a phone reasonably in the recent past, and let's say it's $1,000 phone, a nice iPhone or something like that, and you've only made 4 or 5 months of contractual rental payments with your bill every month, then you may be looking at a significant, maybe $700 or $800 payment to buy out that contract in order to move it. Now, some of the other providers will work with you in terms of moving a contract over, but you are severing one contract with one service provider that has in it an installment payment plan for your phone, and that's going to have to be covered regardless. So one way or another, whether somebody helps you, whether a carrier helps you and buys it out, you do have to take care of your older contract. And then moving it has turned out to be a little bit of a surprise too. It involved clearing the phone, making it unlocked with the existing provider, and then you need to get normally a code of some kind that allows you to transfer the number. And I've had to bounce back and forth between my old carrier and my new carrier a couple of times. You eventually will get it done. They'll give you a PIN. You put the PIN into their system. You move over to your new carrier. You register your SIM card. They'll usually send you a new kit with a new SIM card. Take out the old SIM card, enter the new one, register everything with the new service, and at that point, your calls will all instantly divert to the new system, and you'll be working with a new phone, whether you've bought it or have it under contract with the new carrier. So it can be a little bit complex. I managed to get 4 phones and 5 lines and moved over, but it took me a couple of days of solid spending time working on it to get it to happen. Courtney, do you have any other thoughts?
I think you covered most of it. Most carriers, like Verizon now, has this offer: get your next phone for free. If you change from another carrier to them, they will give you a free iPhone or a free Android phone. It usually will not be the flagship phone. It won't be the latest iPhone. It will be the one down, or the more compact, or the slightly less expensive one. But you're essentially paying for that. You have to commit to a year's worth of service usually. On that carrier, and they'll amortize the cost of that phone over that period of time. And I think you own the phone if you make it through the entire period, like if it's a 1-year sign up or a 2-year contract, that phone will be yours at the end of the contract.
Yeah, in fact, my experience is a lot of them are saying if you're not at the end of your contract, go ahead and renew for another year. Let's say you're a year into a 2-year purchase deal or something like that. They'll say, hey, we'll go ahead and take your old phone back, send you a new phone. We're just going to extend it out to 2 years from now. What they really want, and I think this is true of all of them, is contracts for consistent service for each of their customers to lock them into their ecosystem as long as they can. And that's why there's the little penalty of, if you want to leave us, that's fine, but you have a contract to pay for the phone, so pay it off now before we'll let you out of that. That's just kind of how the industry seems to work. Let's move on to Andre Dale in Berlin. He has the next question. Surprisingly, I want a DeltaCast NDI to HDMI converter. What would be good applications for this device during production? And does anybody have an experience with the DeltaCast? David Brady.
Not with the DeltaCast directly. I have the Magewell equivalent of it, and I'll just use it as a way to get NDI back onto copper into my switch and back out into the ethers. So it's a handy device. Good, have fun with it, and lucky you.
There you go. Congratulations on your windfall. John Snyder in Reno, Nevada is up next. He says, if yesterday's second hour was in the top 5 ever, what are some other episodes you would recommend? Ooh, this is going to be fun. Guy Cochran, John Pretto, and I'm sure I will pop in on this one. Oh, David Brady's in too. I think we've had some really good shows here on Office Hours in the last couple of years, but let's start with Guy.
For sure. There's been some notable ones. For me, it's a little different because I'm kind of a geek. So the AWS one with Jeff Keithley when he showed Sienna, that was like hard hitting because that was the first time that I saw a cloud switcher, and it kind of looked like the ATEM buttons, as red and green, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my God, we're going to the cloud. And that was at the beginning of the of Office Hours where he demoed that, and that was groundbreaking. Emotionally, probably Brian Vander Arks, when he played, that one was another one that the hairs on my arm stood up when he started singing. It was like, wow. I think he sang Freshman. Yeah, it was Freshman. So that was incredible. Elmo, the Christmas one, when Elmo came, he's Alex's neighbor. So he sang Grandma Got Ran Over by a Reindeer. That one's pretty spectacular. Greg Gibson being on was fantastic. He has a really rich history, being a photographer that worked in the White House and got to ride on Air Force One many times. Got to meet a lot of interesting people. Frame.io was very cool. That was a special one because that was an industry hitting one where they had some groundbreaking stuff and demoed it really well. So technically that one was spectacular too because they showed the device, they showed it working. It was new. They had a Sound Devices 888. They had a Teradek, and so seeing that stuff, that expensive stuff live, that some of us, it's out of reach. But if you had a big enough show, you'd get it. And then runner-ups, I would say Steve Brazel. That was the concert photographer. That one was pretty cool too.
Yeah, boy, I remember all of those, and they were all just fabulous. John Pretto.
You did a great job, Guy. The number one attended show so far has been Leo Laporte. Leo Laporte was on. It was a great show. Elmo show was fantastic. Renee Ritchie was good. And Galloping Gourmet was another great show. Those are my top 4 or 5.
Yeah, everybody keep mentioning these, and I go, yeah, that was fabulous too. David Brady.
Not sure if it was an actual Office Hours show. They all kind of blend, but the Pi Build Lab was like it for me. That sold me on being a part of the community.
Yeah, the After Hours Raspberry Pi. Everybody talks about that in such glowing terms. I'm sorry I missed that one, but I got the other ones. For me, it was the Elmo show, but only because of very personal things. I think I had maybe hosted a piece of once, and Alex was supposed to host that show, and through set of circumstances, at the very last minute, there was some technical glitch, and it got tossed to me. So I remember that as being the most panicked I have been in the last 10 years of my life, when I realized that I was going to have to host a live music performance on a office hours on a control system that I barely knew how to operate. Thankfully, Alex had in his preparation, and Alex always talks about preparation, but boy, does he walk that talk, because he had a list of topics, because he knows Almo really well. It's his neighbor. He understands the depth of that. Him sending me 5 minutes before the show that piece of content made all the difference in the world of me being able to stumble my way through that and not utterly embarrass myself. So it's truly a thing about, no matter what the show is, no matter who's going to be on, no matter what you think the stakes are, an ounce of preparation can mean 100 gallons of cure in terms of you being able to fit into something and do it right. So, boy, that's why I remember that one, because I was just so panicked for 5 minutes, and then I was able to get away from the panic and try to perform live for an audience because of the groundwork that he had done. That was I'll never forget that one. David Brady is finished. I guess we're moving on to the next question. But anyway, I hope you wrote down, those of you who are watching the show, some of these great moments in our history, because this has been a pretty magic place to be in. We have seen a lot of that, a lot of what Guy and the rest of the crew here have been talking about. They were great moments in a new form of broadcast, global cast, digicast, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's really, we've had moments that have really been pretty special here already. So moving on, Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand is up next. How does Office Hours propose to handle the inevitable conflict amongst the team? What HR resolution techniques will be used, or is this org too new to consider this a part of people management? That's a complicated question. John, you want to take a little start on it?
Yeah, this is a great question, Peter. Why are you awake so late, or is it early for you? I don't know. Peter's over in New Zealand. We've only had one conflict in 2 years, and so everybody's been really gracious, and we're all here to learn and onward and upward with the group, which have come. We've got to have a PhD in media production now from where we started off. If you do the math, it's amazing. And we had a problem with one individual. He was asked to leave, and he left the community. It was that simple.
Yeah. John Wallace?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to respect. As long as everyone's respecting each other, we have strong moderation of what is acceptable behavior amongst each other. I think that we can all hold each other highly accountable to that. And there's tons of people who I think have embraced the culture that is Office Hours. I've only been a part of it for a very short period of time, but it's very apparent via like all the host management via After Hours. Everything is taken very seriously, and that culture is maintained. And it's not just Alex; it's several people holding that up.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it starts with him, because if he hadn't had a series of standards that he wanted to enumerate and was able to, and it's not really crack the whip, but was able to articulate those, here's why we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do it this way. And if you don't want to play that, it is, clean show. There's a whole bunch of things that he just set down as standard and said, this is how it's going to be. If you want to come and play, follow those. That was key to it. But the other thing is that this panel does tend to attract people who've been in the industry for a long time. I don't think this is a comfortable place for people who are making it up as you go along. You really do have to have kind of the background and the knowledge. You have to have been there. It's pretty clear quickly when we see panelists, and there have been 100 or more easily panelists that have come through here. When somebody has done the work to get to the point where they really can answer these questions legitimately. And usually those are people who have learned that BSing your way through life doesn't work very well. And you really do have to put in the time, get the experience. And that means that the panels are always pretty calm in terms of, we're not all trying to make a reputation. We're not all trying to become stars. We're not all trying to out-answer or out-think or out-talk anybody. We're just honestly trying to say, here's what I've experienced, and I'm happy to share it with you because I remember what it was like when I was starting out. And boy, do I wish somebody had shared with me honestly those little things that help you get to the next level. That is really the spirit of Office Hours. And I think it's ingrained in everybody that comes on the panel. So I think that's as much why it works as anything else. Let's move on. Andre Dolly in Berlin says, I'm running a stream in 1080p 30, bringing in several Zoom panelists via laptops into the ATEM. Should I adjust the second screen's frequency in the laptops, or should I leave the ATEM input scalers to do this? Do I gain or lose stuff either way? Guy Cochran's going to take a shot at this.
Yeah, I would say to leave it natively at whatever it chooses to sync to. So right when you plug it in, if it's a Mac laptop or a PC laptop, it's going to handshake and it's going to choose what it thinks is best. And unless you see like tearing, I wouldn't start making any changes. So if you're seeing tearing, then I would dumb it down from, if it was syncing at 60, dumb it down to 30. But yeah, otherwise I would just let it natively sync to what it wants to.
Yeah, my experience has been a little bit the same. I mean, I have enough things to touch every day when I launch this system and put it together that the fewer menus I can go into and change anything, I find that hugely valuable. So I try to work with gear and other attached outboard devices as they show up, and hopefully I can get something set in my system so that it just sees it, works with it, and it's fine. Courtney has a thought too.
Yeah, I think whenever you plug into one, it will set it. It'll do the EDID and set its frame rate. And then you want to match your other laptops to whatever's plugged into number one. And that'll give you the least amount of latency between switching between the two. But it's only going to be 1 frame or 2 frames at most.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. It comes from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. Hi, how you doing? Here outside of office hours, do you see the office hours, where outside of office hours, do you see the office hours 2.0 system being used? John Pretto?
We would love to use it for the Rock OH space if it was ready. We're having to use Jeff. One of Jeff's driving down from Texas to do all of our switching in the cloud. Hopefully Guy comes too. Working with PTZ Optics, hopefully getting some cameras from them to demo for. We've got an away shot. We'd like to do a shot, but we'd absolutely like to use it for that production. We got, I think, 9 cameras set up, going to an extreme and then fed into Jeff's big bus or one of his production trailers, and then a ubiquity shot up to Las Vegas Boulevard and then onto the net. It's a pretty complex deal.
You guys are making me really jealous. I want to rent a camper and come because this sounds like it's going to be so much fun. Guy Cochran has a thought.
Yeah, knowing Jonas, I think that he wants to do it in the cloud. So I think we're really talking about OH 3.0 because the amount for a constellation alone is $10,000. Then the FSHDR, it gets pricey pretty quick. So I'd love to be able to spin up a system that costs less than $10 an hour to run. Then as I walk through a Barnes & Noble and look at the magazine rack and I see gardening and sailing and handguns and Corvettes, all these magazines, Bridal, whatever, I just see that there's a future there for a show for every single one of those magazines. It's just a matter of showing people the light and getting the panelists together and making a show. But I love the Q&A format. I mean, it's amazing that we could do one of these shows without a whole bunch of pre-production, because normally there's meetings, tons of meetings to get a show off the ground, scripts and approvals and all that. And we're just taking questions from an audience. I mean, it's pretty special. So hopefully we get this going in the cloud. So Jonas, talk to me. Let's make it happen.
It absolutely is. And, in marketing speak, those are called verticals, all these little different industries. And I think the number of verticals for this format literally are almost unlimited. It's amazing. Actually, when I first read that, I thought he meant where outside of office hours, like who else is using the 2.0 system? And I don't think many, because Alex is in the middle of developing it right now. I do know the regular Mukanabek and things like that. He's had very limited, he gives permission to people to use it because he wants the feedback on it, but he constantly says that it's not quite ready yet. And I know it's continually being developed as we run into more and new things. So at some point, he said continuously, at some point it's going to be a product and it will be out on the market for others to take advantage of, but we're not there yet. Moving on, Andy Carluccio, our friend in Washington, D.C., says, can anyone recommend a printer, a 2D printer that works reliably and that doesn't have ink that is the cost equivalent of molten platinum? Anybody? Let's see. John Wallace is going to start for us here.
I've used the Epson EcoTank. It definitely helps with the cost of ink. But from a LaserJet perspective, HP has some really good products. I've had really good luck with Brother printers, surprisingly. I have those in production for a long time with very little service.
Okay, John Pretto.
So, Andy, couple of things here. I have this Samsung printer. This is an office type printer, but it's not terribly expensive. It was $3,500, and it's got a 50-page feeder on it. I do a lot of contract scanning, but it also I can scan from there, and it will automatically feed that into my Dropbox. This thing has never had a problem in 5 years or so. It's fantastic. And reach out to Doug Ferguson because we need your help. We're doing it right in the middle of the show, and he's looking for help on OSC. If you could reach out to Doug Ferguson, that would be great.
All right, Courtney Gooden here for this show. Courtney?
I've had pretty good luck with this brother. I switched away from HP. The quality just went in the toilet, I think, for HP. This brother is a multifunction, so it's a scanner, fax, and it does duplex scanning, which is something that a lot of other printers don't do. It has a document feeder, so I can scan in double-sided pages, and it scans both the front and the back at the same time. So it saves a lot of time when you're scanning double-sided documents in. It also prints out duplex, so it can then copy that double-sided document onto double-sided pages and output it. And it's a LaserJet. I have one color HP printer, but it's always a problem because I don't use it frequently enough, and the heads are always clogged when I go to print out a color image, and I have to clean the heads, and there goes half the ink. So I usually use a laser printer, which is the best way to go.
I'm going to do a +1 on the Epson EcoTank. We moved to that about 2 years ago, and not having to buy those cartridges at Costco constantly has been a real big boon for me, and it doesn't seem to clog up like the other ones did. So anyway, we're moving on. We've got a few questions. We're going to go pretty fast now. Morgan Price of Victoria, British Columbia, says, how would panelists collect audio questions from a virtual audience for a Q&A in a podcast, not live Q&A, wanting a balance of ease for listeners and usable audio quality? John Wallace.
There's a product, a website called SpeakPipe, SpeakPipe.com. Lets you register for essentially a voicemail box. You can go to that website. Your listeners can record themselves. It will send you that voicemail message. No, you can also just simply create an email address and have people send you voice recordings.
Absolutely. David Brady next.
Yeah, and the other one is a platform called Twilio, and that's kind of what the call response system that put out Call and Oates was built on. We used it at our house of worship for other things, but it's a development platform. Might be worth looking at. TWILLO tool or IO.
Douglas Carmichael has our next question. He says, if you're directing, cutting, mixing an extreme scale event, how do you respond to and plan for equipment failures? David Brady.
Belt and suspenders. That's the old adage, belt and suspenders.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on that. I particularly in audio, because that was the thing that I knew would snap me more than anything else when I used to do a lot of event recording. And so it was primary, secondary, and tertiary systems that are in duplicate. So if I had a wireless mic on somebody, I would also run a board feed out, and then I'd go to a speaker and put up a tall stand and put a microphone with another recorder on that. And twice in my career, that mic on a stand with a separate recorder on it's made the difference between me being able to bill for the job or not, because both the wireless transmitter back to my camera and the house feed messed up, and I was left with that one tertiary backup, and I was able to bill and keep going and not lose money because of that. John Pretto and then Courtney Gooden are going to sneak in on this. John?
So I wrote some notes about backups, etc., and it's turned into a 20-page document. It's the actual science and math involved in failover and setting it up in the mathematics related to serial versus parallel and all that, and it's been very helpful. What we do now is we've got all of our guys working from their homes, and we have duplicate. We're in the show right now. We're in the middle of a show right now. We have duplicate TDs, and so if one TD has a problem, the other one automatically takes over. So one guy's got all the same content that the other one is, and this happens a lot. The other guy takes it over seamlessly in the middle of the program, and that's worked out real well for us.
Courtney, you want to do something really quick? Alex is back, and we don't have much time to get through 5 questions. So we may not make it.
Sure. Just look for anything that has a single point of failure. If there's any piece of equipment that could take the whole thing down, have it duplicated in parallel, and just let other things take up the slack that are not single point of failure. Don't worry about them too much.
All right. Alex, did you have something you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the producers for all the great questions. Thanks for keeping everybody here rolling with great questions, great conversation. Thank you to the panelists for keeping this moving in my absence, and thanks, Bill, for keeping it holding it all together there. So thanks so much, and we appreciate all of you. And now we're going to jump into After Hours, and I'm going to hand this off